Hey everyone, it's Daniel with Slow Haste, where we talk about synths, electronic music, and creative applications and techniques in the context of electronic music making. Today, I want to talk to you about time stretching. And for those of you who are unaware, at its most basic foundations, time stretching is the concept of separating the variables of pitch and time. I will briefly demonstrate by playing this sample. If I adjust the pitch up an octave, the sample plays twice as fast. And contrarily, if I play the sample down an octave, the sample plays twice as slow. So time stretching enables us to separate those variables to play the sample at an octave up, and it will occupy the same amount of time. And likewise, it can play an octave lower, but still occupy the same amount of time. So I just want to let you know I'm taking this method of time stretching from a YouTube user under the name of Dielectrics, who explores a couple of applications. He shows a couple of examples with breakbeats and amen breaks and things like that. And I'm pretty sure that those are coming from a source where the tempo is predetermined. I had to do a bit of experimentation in my run through with this, and I'll show everyone where I kind of ran into some hiccups using that method. But I think that with a little bit of tinkering in the LFO page, you can find settings that will work for any sample you want to use. So first, I am just going to play a jam for you where I utilized time stretching. And if I didn't tell you there was time stretching in this beat, you might not even notice. I used it in an application where I take a sample and use it pitched down to act as kind of like a bass, a low mid line. And then in the next pattern, I pitch it up and I bring in an actual bass line and use that same sample as a melodic component. So we'll play through the jam and then I'll explore how I implemented this with the sample that I chose to time stretch. Okay, so that was the jam. Really quick and simple. Again, just kind of an exercise I wanted to do to demonstrate how this works in the context of a song. But there are so many applications that you can utilize time stretching in. I'm kind of new to the concept of using it with a sampler and in general in my beats. So I'm really excited to explore how to use this more once I get a bit more comfortable with it. Anyways, so here is the sample that I'm using that I played for you at the beginning. It comes from Blank Form's TAPE HAZE 3 or 4, I can never remember which, but if you follow this channel, you know that I use so many of those samples, and I just want to give Blank Forms credit for taking the time to make these super high quality, nice, fuzzy, rich, warm tape samples that I overuse all the time. Definitely got my money's worth. But anyways, here's the sample. And I have the same sample time stretched already sequenced on pattern 6, and I'm just going to hit the play button so you can hear it in the context of the pattern. You're going to hear it affected and panned a bit, but here it is. And I'm going to bring you to the source page so you can see how it's scanning through the sample. Right, and then we're going to go to track 8 and look at the source page. So you can see it's the same sample. And now I'm going to show you how we got to this time stretched. And as you can see, it's still occupying the same amount of time. Whereas if we alter this sample, again, you can see it takes up more or less time depending on the relative speed of the sample. So the first thing we want to do is we want to look at the start time within the waveform. So we're going to go to our original sample. So what you want to do if you want the whole sample to play is you want to bring the start time to 60 because the entire sample length is 120 on the Digitakt. So you're starting halfway through the sample. The next step is to determine how long you want your pattern to be, right? So we've decided we want to use this whole sample, and we have a 4-bar beat. So I'm going to place trigs on every single step. Sorry if my hand looks like it's in an uncomfortable position. I'm trying not to bang the camera tripod. Keep a relatively stable image for you all. So we have our triggers on each step of the sequence. So if we play it, let's mute the actual time stretch track, but if we play it, we're just going to get that. And I'm going to leave this playing while we play around with the LFO so you can kind of hear how things are being affected. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take step 1 of the sequence and we are going to put that trig lock on the LFO. So the LFO is going to start over every time the pattern starts. The next thing that we're going to do is change our waveform to saw. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do in the LFO is adjust the depth. We want the depth to be 60 because, as we discussed, we're using the entire length of the sample, which is 120, and the LFO is going to cycle from that middle point to 0 and 120 if we put it at 60, right? So let me just show you what that sounds like once we get to 60. I know that exact values on the Digitakt can be fiddly, so just be patient. And let's go to the source and take a look. Okay, so nothing changes because we don't have destination set up. We're going to change that to sample start. That's the most important part. So I just changed it to sample start because that's the parameter that we're modulating, right? That's one of the basic principles of this, is that we're modulating the sample start time across each of these steps so that the sample plays along the entire waveform and we can modulate the pitch of that while the timing remains intact. So let's see what that did. We're going to listen to it. All right, so we're going all over the place now, right? What we want to do is we want to get some control here. So the next thing to modulate is the speed. If you hold function while you turn these knobs, it locks it to basic values that you might use in these applications. So you're not having to spin around and find exact values for your parameters. So you can see that the speed at which the LFO is moving is changing a lot about how it plays, and it can reverse and kind of chop up the grains that we've created in different ways. And we want to play around to find a good spot where the sample starts to sound whole. So you can see, or you can hear, that it sounds like we're approaching that area right around -2. And it's going to be a whole integer. To get rid of that clicking, we're just going to adjust the attack time. And you can hear that we have these artifacts here, right? So this is something that I haven't been able to quite get around, aside from removing some of the triggers. So I'll let you... It kind of makes it more bearable if you remove half of the triggers. You still get this pulsing sound, but to be honest, in the context of a full composition, you're not really going to notice that as much. And I'm sure there are more workarounds to this, adjusting the envelope and perhaps even adjusting the resolution and the length of each step, the trig rate and things like that I've seen in some other videos. But this is, the most basic foundation. of how to get that time stretch to happen. So I'll play it with our other track that we had previously time stretched. And I will pan this track to the other side. So this is over here, and that's over there. That's the new track. And that's the sample from the song. And let's play the new track just to show you that we can change the tune and the timing remains intact. So again, what I did is I just used this sample in the first pattern as like a low mid bassier part. And then in the next pattern, I played it as a melody when I brought in an actual bass line. So it allows your samples to be a bit more versatilely used in the context of any given beat or pattern, and you can really play around with it. I think that it's useful to practice this exercise with a lot of different samples, and I plan to do so. I did the same thing with this sample too. This is time stretched. And one thing that is important is to make sure your BPM is kind of set out before you get started. So you want to get the BPM down. So I kind of just tapped it out like that. And based on my errors and how it corrects it, I said, okay, it's probably at 140 BPM. And it might be a little bit higher or lower. I'm not sure, but 140 seemed to work for these two samples. So it's important to kind of figure that out before you get started. You don't have to be super precise if you're okay with that, just as long as you're around the right ballpark for these samples that you're using. And with that, I implore you to explore this on particularly your own samples to see if you can really get creative with what you need to do in the LFO page to get this to line up correctly. There is trial and error involved, absolutely. And that's half the fun, I think, is messing around and seeing how you can make things a little bit more granular if you turn the speed up or down one way, because that could be a fun mode of sequencing on the Digitakt in its own right. And I also implore you to check out those dielectrics videos. They're very useful. They're very straightforward. And I think that those methods work really well if you have samples that you're pulling from a DAW or other sample packs where they are, the tempo is predetermined and you can line everything up perfectly and get a really pristine result. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel's visibility out and allows me to get this stuff out to more people, and I really like interacting with you all. So thanks again for your support, and I hope you enjoy whatever you got going on today. Peace.